I used to work the night shift at a hospital. Most nights were quiet, just moving patients, delivering paperwork, normal hospital stuff. But one night, I was asked to take a folder to the fourth floor, a part of the hospital that was supposed to be closed for renovations. When I got there, some of the patient room doors were open, and I could see people lying in the beds. At first, I thought the wing had reopened, but when I checked the nurse's desk, all the patient charts were blank. And when I walked back down the hallway, one of the patients I had just seen in bed was now standing in the doorway, watching me. A few years ago, I worked the night shift at a hospital, not as a nurse, not as a doctor. I worked in patient transport, which basically meant if someone needed to be moved from one department to another, I was one of the people pushing the beds or wheelchairs, taking them to surgery, radiology, ICU, or wherever they needed to go. The job itself wasn't difficult, but the hours were strange. Most of my shifts were overnight, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. If you've never been inside a hospital that late, it feels completely different from the daytime. During the day, hospitals are loud, doctors moving quickly through the halls, phones ringing at every desk, families sitting in waiting rooms. There's always movement, always noise, but after midnight, most of that disappears. The hallways get quieter, the lights are dimmed in certain areas, and every sound seems to echo farther than it should. You start noticing things you normally wouldn't. The hum of the air vents, the sound of a cart will squeaking somewhere down the hall, even footsteps from floors above you. Most nights were uneventful. A few patient transfers, maybe someone coming back from surgery, sometimes an emergency patient arriving from the ER. But between those calls, there could be long stretches where nothing happened. That night started the same way. Quiet, almost too quiet. Around 1:40 a.m., I had just finished moving a patient from radiology back to their room. I was heading toward the staff break room, planning to grab coffee, when the front desk called me over the radio. They needed a folder of paperwork delivered to the fourth floor, to a temporary nursing station. That wasn't unusual. Hospitals move paperwork constantly. Charts, forms, test results. Someone is always carrying something somewhere. So I grabbed the folder from the desk and headed toward the elevator. Now, the fourth floor was supposed to be under renovation. At least part of it was. They had been remodeling several patient rooms, replacing equipment, updating the layout. Because of that, most staff didn't go up there unless they had a reason. But hospitals are complicated places. Sections close and reopen all the time. So I assumed they had temporarily moved some patients there. The elevator ride was quiet, just a soft mechanical sound as it moved upward. When the doors opened, the hallway was dim. Only some of the ceiling lights were on. The others were turned off, probably because of the renovation work. The corridor stretched out in both directions, long, silent, almost empty. Right near the elevator, there was a small temporary desk set up, a folding table, a chair, a phone sitting on top. But no one was there. I assumed the nurse assigned to the station had stepped away, maybe checking on a patient. So I started walking down the hallway, looking for someone to hand the paperwork to. As I passed the first room, I noticed the door was slightly open. Inside, there was a hospital bed and someone lying in it, connected to a monitor. At first, that didn't seem strange. Hospitals are full of patients. That's the whole point. But what caught my attention was the silence. Normally, when patients are in rooms, you hear machines, heart monitors beeping, for pumps clicking, something. But here, there was almost no sound, just a faint hum of the overhead lights. I kept walking, passing another room, door slightly open, another patient lying in bed, then another room, another patient, 3 rooms in a row, each with someone lying perfectly still. I slowed down a little because something about it felt strange. None of the monitors were making noise. None of the patients were moving, not even slightly. It almost felt like walking past mannequins instead of people. Eventually, I reached the temporary nurse's desk halfway down the hall, the one they mentioned on the radio. But it was empty. No nurse, no computer, just a chair and the phone sitting on the desk. I placed a folder of paperwork on the counter, then looked around, trying to figure out where everyone was. That's when I noticed something else on the desk, a stack of patient charts. I picked up the top one, looking for a name or a room number, but the chart was blank. No patient information, no medical notes, nothing written inside. I checked another chart. Same thing, completely empty. That was the moment I started feeling uneasy, because if patients were actually staying on this floor, their charts wouldn't be blank. I slowly turned, looking back down the hallway, toward the rooms I had passed earlier, and something had changed. The doors that had been open were closed now, every single one of them. I was absolutely sure they had been open when I walked past. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself I had remembered wrong. Then I heard something. Behind me, a faint sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. I turned slowly, looking down the hallway again. One of the room doors had opened just a few inches, and someone was standing in the doorway. The same patient I had seen earlier, the one lying in the bed, now standing in the hallway, watching me, without moving, without saying anything. And the strangest part was that the monitor behind them, the one connected to the bed, was still flat, completely silent, like it wasn't connected to anyone at all. For a few seconds, I just stood there, looking down the hallway at the person standing in the doorway. They didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there, watching me. The hallway lights hummed softly above us, and the entire floor felt unnaturally quiet. I remember thinking something simple at first. Maybe the patient had gotten out of bed. Maybe they were confused. That happens in hospitals sometimes, especially late at night. So I started walking slowly toward them. But the closer I got, the stranger it felt, because the person wasn't moving at all, not shifting their weight, not blinking, not reacting to me approaching. They were just standing there, perfectly still, in the doorway. I stopped a few feet away and looked past them into the room. The hospital bed was empty. The sheets were still perfectly flat, like no one had been lying there. But I knew what I had seen earlier. I had walked past that room, and there had definitely been someone in that bed. I looked back at the person in the doorway, trying to say something, trying to ask if they needed help. But before I could speak, the person slowly stepped backward into the room and pulled the door closed. The soft click of the latch echoed down the hallway. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide what to do next. Normally, if a patient leaves their room, we report it to the nurse on duty. But there wasn't a nurse anywhere on that floor. The desk was empty. The charts were blank. And something about the entire situation felt wrong. So instead of knocking on the door, I turned around and started walking back toward the elevator. The hallway suddenly felt longer than before, my footsteps echoing softly against the floor. Halfway back to the elevator, I heard something behind me, a door opening. I stopped, slowly turning around. Now 2 doors were open, 2 figures standing in 2 separate doorways, both watching me, neither of them moving, neither of them speaking. My chest tightened because I knew for a fact those doors had been closed seconds ago. I started walking faster toward the elevator, trying not to look at them, trying to convince myself this was some strange misunderstanding. When I reached the elevator, I pressed a button and waited. Those few seconds felt longer than they should have, because when I looked down the hallway again, more doors had opened, 3, then 4. Each doorway now had someone standing in it, all facing me, all perfectly still. The elevator finally arrived. The doors opened, and I stepped inside quickly, pressing the button for the first floor. As the elevator doors started to close, I caught one last glimpse of the hallway. Every doorway was open now, and every single one of them had someone standing inside, watching the elevator. When I reached the first floor, I went straight to the nurse's station, trying to find someone. Anyone. One of the nurses looked up when I walked over and asked what was wrong. I told her I had just come from the 4th floor and that there were patients walking around in the hallway. She stared at me for a moment, then frowned. "The 4th floor," she said. I nodded. Her expression changed immediately. "That floor has been closed for months," she said, "after the incident." I asked what incident she meant, but she just shook her head, like she didn't want to explain it. Later that night, I went back to the security office and checked the hospital camera system. I pulled up the footage from the 4th floor hallway, from the exact time I had been there. The video showed me walking down the corridor, carrying the paperwork folder, passing each of the patient rooms. But something was missing. The rooms were empty. The beds were empty. The monitors were off. There was no one in any of the rooms. Then I rewound the footage to the moment right before I entered the elevator. And that's when I saw something that hadn't been there before. In the doorway of every room, standing perfectly still, there were people watching me walk away. And on the next camera, the one facing the hallway outside the elevator, I saw something even worse. One of those figures walking out a closed wing and turning toward the floor where I was working.